After almost beating Texas in the college football playoff quarterfinals, the Arizona State Sun Devils are returning 18 starters from their playoff team last year, including starting quarterback Sam Levitt, who's going to need to take on a little bit of a bigger role in this offense in order for the Sun Devils to make another college football playoff run. However, the season starts off with a pretty easy first three games. At Northern Arizona, definitely going to be a win. Mississippi State, not a very good team in the SEC. Even though it's on the road, we're also very confident in this one, as well as Texas State. The Sun Devils will be starting out 3-0.
Yeah, this is definitely a start you're going to want to see from a team that's losing probably one of their biggest playmakers in Cam Scatterboot, did just about everything for the Sun Devils team. And that's why Jonas said at the beginning Sam Levitt's going to have to take a bigger role on this offense. He played a key part in the offense, but with Sam Levitt passing for just under 3,000 passing yards, with Cam Skadbu having 1,700 rushing yards, that production is going to have to shift either towards Sam Levitt a little bit more, or they're going to have to hope some of their young running backs step up. And I think Sam Levitt, being the senior returning guy, is going to take that on his shoulders, and it's gonna matter in their matchup against Baylor on the road. Baylor is my personal Big 12 team that I think has a chance to compete for a Big 12 title. They have Sawyer Robertson returning as their starting quarterback, probably going to be, in my opinion, a possible top 10 quarterback next season in all of college football. They also have both their starting running backs from last season returning. Both are incredibly young as well, those being Bryson Washington and Dawson Pendergrass, and the receiving core is also pretty much intact. It's really just making sure that defense sticks together and is able to hold teams like Arizona State. This really could go either way, especially with it being at Baylor. But Arizona State does have the weapons to compete. They do have Jordan Tyson back as Sam Levitt's primary target. And after last season, I really just would like to keep riding on the Sun Devils train.
However, we do think that that train is going to be derailed a little early on with this Baylor game as they pick up a loss to the Bears on the road. Next, they have TCU at home, another team that we think has some serious potential in the Big 12 as a potential dark horse. They're returning Josh Hoover at quarterback, but the key for TCU is that they are losing their entire wide receiver room. I think, especially early on in the season, that's going to play a big factor in this offense and going to give Arizona State a advantage on top of the home field advantage. Give me the Sun Devils and just an overall more experienced team in these big games to pull out a win here and bounce back from the loss to Baylor. So they will be 4-1 heading into their first bye week.
And out of that bye week, they play a Utah team that is very interesting, a little unorthodox of a team. We're so used to seeing Utah end up in the top 25 during the preseason rankings. And then in the past couple of years, they've disappointed time after time. And usually that is the cause of injuries. Now they're bringing in Devin Dampier and Wayshawn Parker in the transfer portal to be their starting quarterback and starting running back, respectively. And they can give a much needed spark to this offense if they're able to stay healthy. And this Utah team does have a pretty high ceiling if they play to the same level we saw them play at their former schools. And with it being at home for Utah, there's some potential here for them to pull off an upset against Arizona State. However, I do think the connection between Sam Levitt and Jordan Tyson is going to be the key here. That connection between two leaders on this team is going to be all the offense that Arizona State's going to need. The Sun Devils are going to move to 5-1 here.
Yeah, I think that the Utes should be a little bit improved this season. However, like Connor was saying, Arizona State's going to get it done on the road and then head back home to face Texas Tech. Now, the Red Raiders are a very intriguing team. Connor said earlier, Baylor's his Big 12 dark horse. Well, the Red Raiders are mine. They spent a ton of money on their football facilities this past season and are bringing in the number two transfer portal class. At this point in the season, those transfer players should have developed and really learned the scheme for Texas Tech. I think the Red Raiders are going to be very, very good in 2025. And even though this is a road game, we are going to take Texas Tech to pull off the upset over Arizona State. Going to shock quite a few people, I think, but the Sun Devils will fall to 5-2.
Definitely going to be an interesting game. Maybe a little premature to think that Baylor and Texas Tech are going to be able to upset the reigning Big 12 champs, but I do think both have the potential to. And that just really comes down to the fact that the Big 12 is one of the most chaotic conferences in all of college football. We've seen it time after time, especially even last year. Like looking at last year, there were so many possible pathways for different teams to make the conference championship. There were pathways for BYU to make it, for Arizona State to make it, to Iowa State to make it, for Colorado to make it. I think maybe teams like TCU had a chance to make it too, even though they had long shot odds. The Big 12, anything can happen. You could have the worst team like Oklahoma State play their best game against any team in the Big 12 and maybe pull up an upset win. And that's why it's hard for teams in the Big 12 to go 12-0 because we see the parity in college football in general. It start to even out with the transfer portal, but that parity is even thinner in the Big 12. So that's why teams like Baylor and Texas Tech, in our opinions, have legitimate chances of dethroning the reigning champ in Arizona State. Houston, on the other hand, not so much. Even though they're bringing in Connor Wegman from Texas A&M after he was benched in place of Marcel Reed, still has a lot of potential to develop and turn into a really decent quarterback that can maybe breathe a little bit of life into the Houston program. But I do think that the supporting cast around him is not going to be strong enough to support him and give him that signature win in his first season as a Cougar. And I think Arizona State, especially after that Texas Tech loss, are really going to be fighting for any possible chance of making the college football playoffs, and they will need to be perfect the remainder of the season. So they're going to get a win here against Houston.
Yeah, and I think that, like Connor was just saying, the need to be perfect is going to play into this rematch from last year's Big 12 championship with Iowa State. Rocco Becht is back at quarterback for the Cyclones, and once again, they're going to be a very solid team. We saw the Sun Devils absolutely run away with this one last year. I think it'll be considerably closer this season, but we like the Sun Devils to pull off this road win. And what we have is really a coin flip game right now.
I think the difference maker here is that Arizona State is just going to have more playmakers returning on the offensive side of the ball. We saw both Iowa State wide receivers get drafted by the Texans, no less, in the second round. Just losing those key contributors is gonna, I think, play a key factor here. They're gonna have guys step up, obviously, but I do think Arizona State is gonna have the senior leadership to get the win. After the bye week, they have a relatively easy schedule for the remaining three games, starting with West Virginia. West Virginia lost, I believe, 22 players on one singular day in the spring transfer portal window, and I think lost 58 total or somewhere in the 50s. This West Virginia team is just going to be so gutted, and I think the players might be a little dejected and upset that so many people have gone and that they're just in such a bad place. And I really don't see them being very competitive, especially with it being at home for the Sun Devils. I think they're going to be able to get the job done against the Mountaineers.
This West Virginia team is likely going to be struggling quite a bit in 2025. So Arizona State should pretty easily win this one. Their next matchup going to be a little bit tougher going on the road to face Colorado. Obviously, Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter are gone. Deion Sanders still the head coach, and he brought in a very solid quarterback out of the transfer portal. One of the most sought after quarterbacks, Caden Salter out of Liberty. He's going to be a really solid dual threat option for Colorado. And I think that they're going to have a good season once again on offense. The defense maybe has a few more question marks, especially losing their best player in Travis Hunter. We do think that Arizona State, though, is the better team overall. They have more starting experience returning with, like I said earlier, 18 starters returning. We like the Sun Devils to pull off this road win in crunch time. to go to 9-2.
And then finally, they have the in-state rivalry game against Arizona. The Wildcats do have Noah Fifita returning as their starting quarterback, but are losing his biggest target in Tetaroa McMillan after he went in the top 10 of the NFL draft. And Noah Fafita is going to have to step up in a big way. 2 years ago, he had a phenomenal season and was looking like one of the best quarterbacks in college football. But last season, he did regress. He took way more sacks than the previous season and just statistically was not as good as he could have been and was in the previous season. If he's not able to return to form, Arizona is going to struggle once again and fall short of the expectations that they had. And I think Arizona State is just going to outclass them. I think Sam Levitt is definitely more consistent. He's going to be the better quarterback in this one, and the supporting cast around him is going to be leagues better than whatever Arizona will have. So this is going to be a huge closeout for the Arizona State season. Hopefully, still able to salvage a conference championship appearance, but if not, they're going to have to hope that some of their signature wins, including Iowa State, are able to push them over the edge.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be an interesting conversation for the playoffs with this resume. There's a few good teams on here that they beat, like TCU and Iowa State. But I mean, other than that, the losses to Baylor and Texas Tech is going to hurt them. Really is going to depend on where both the Bears and Red Raiders finish. You'll have to come back and check out those videos to find out. But our way too early projection for Arizona State was 9.25 wins. We predicted them to go 10-2 originally. We are going to stick with that prediction of 10-2. The projection took just a slight dip down to 9.15 wins, 6.3 and 2.7 in the Big 12. The floor for Arizona State this season, I think, is 8-4. They really have a good chance to have a solid season no matter what. 8-4 definitely would be a disappointment. However, the ceiling going to be 11-1, 8-1 in the Big 12. Now, it's not 12-0 just because of how crazy the Big 12 conference is. I don't see anybody coming out of this conference undefeated. So I couldn't tell you which game it would be, but the odds of Arizona State losing one game are very high. However, we're going to predict them to go 10-2 for the 2025 season. So thank you guys for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe, and we will see you in our next video.